Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee and Football, presented by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. I'm your host, Blake Monroe, where I'm joined each and every morning by Bobby Burton and CJ Vogel. And we got an action-packed show for you today. Former Longhorn defensive back Cedric Griffin will be joining us here in just a little bit. But before we get into that, guys, and talk to Cedric here in a while, let's talk about this current team. They head out for New Orleans later today, and there's going to be a send-off. CJ, can you give everybody the details on that?
Yeah, right around 10:30, the send-off festivities will begin. They have Texas Palm, kind of a photo opportunity for the team as well. Buses will depart right around the area from Bevo Boulevard to MLK, right in that area, right by the the Texas School of Social Sciences, right in that area. Buses will depart around 11:30. So if you're in the area and looking to send off the team as they head to New Orleans, that'll be the area. Team will arrive in New Orleans around 3 p.m. So right in the middle of the day, ready to get rolling to practices, which start tomorrow. So good time to be a Longhorn. A lot of fun, as we get inch ever so closer to the kickoff in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah, I want to add this. The practices are all going to be in the afternoon for Texas. Washington has the morning practices. And, unlike CJ, I don't know if you remember this, but used to when I was working for Texas, we went to the Cotton Bowl. We actually practiced at SMU. Well, these days you actually practice at the actual bowl facility. So all Texas practices will be indoors at the Superdome.
Very interesting. Well, speaking of practices, Bobby, obviously Texas has a few under their belt right now. What's the latest that you're hearing? Maybe who's standing out, especially amongst the young guys?
Well, it'd be trite to say Arch Manning, but I continue to hear that the freshman from New Orleans is, just not only immensely talented, but also has it between the ears, so to speak. And so you add that together. I've heard nothing but great things about him. Also, Jelani McDonald and Warren Roberson I've heard great things there. Jonte Cook, the wide receiver out of DeSoto. I've also heard some very, positive things on Trey Wisner. And so, look, it's not the guys aren't a surprise at this point that we're hearing about, in my opinion. I do think that they're hopeful some other guys come on this spring. They've got 21 new guys coming in this spring as well. But right now, kind of the same guys that we've been hearing about on top of the ones that played so much, like Manny Muhammad, like Anthony Hill, like Cedric Baxter.
And then, CJ, I know that you've done some deep diving into some stats here that pertains to both teams. I'm going to let you share that with folks now. Very interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, no, more on the Washington side of things. And I think, the passing game is what gets all the highlights, all the credit. Obviously, Penix has been tremendous this season. And when you look at what Polk and Rome Odunze have done, I mean, it's hard not to stare at the gaudy numbers that they've put up offensively through the air. But it's more the running game that excites me. And, I guess exciting is the wrong word, but it catches my attention for a lot of reasons. And it really starts with Dylan Johnson, the Washington running back, 200 carries, 1,100 yards, averaging, 5.5 a carry, 14 touchdowns. But here's what's interesting. Out of those 201 carries, 99 of them have come off the edge per Pro Football Focus. So they're running outside zone, but with that zone comes a lot of pulling. What I mean by that, Washington will pull two guards, a tackle, a center, all sorts of variations with their running game to create, an extra lead blocker going into the hole. And that's really interesting because going back to that Oregon Pac-12 championship game, there were 81 total snaps. 32 of them involved some sort of pulling guard or offensive lineman specifically. 22 of them, over a quarter of the snaps, involved two guys pulling at a time. And that that included some pass plays as well. The Washington creativity under DeBoer in terms of moving the pocket, getting extra blockers in space to create running lanes is something that Texas is going to have really sound defensive approach to defend it. And it's intriguing because when you watch it against Oregon, the running lanes were wide open. And while they had good success against, Texas last year in the Alamo Bowl, Texas hasn't allowed, a big running day since Dylan Gabriel in the Cotton Bowl. Dylan Gabriel is not the running threat that we'll face with Michael Penix this weekend, but that running game is unique in the sense that there is always a new blocker coming into the fold to reach that second level. That's why they have so much success in that running game right now. And while it doesn't necessarily have the home run capability that the offense or that the passing game does, it does pose one of the largest dual run pass game threats that Texas will face the entire season. So yeah, certainly intriguing. I mean, I'm looking through the numbers right now. 22 out of 81 snaps had 2 pulling offensive linemen, and that doesn't include, a pinch and pull, the tight end pinching down and the offensive tackle waterfalling over, which they do very often on the zone scheme. There's a lot of variations. They'll pull centers, double guards, a guard tackle, guard center. Even there's one instance they had a center tackle as well. So any type of variation you can imagine on that offensive line, they've done it and they've shown it. That's going to be a lot of preparation for the Texas defensive line and linebackers, and it's going to cause a lot of communication issues if Texas isn't up to speed 100%.
Well, CJ, let me ask you this. For those that are maybe just casual viewers, who does that resemble the most that Texas has played, if anybody?
Yeah, I keep saying I think Oklahoma is a good comparison for Washington. For a lot of reasons, I think, a veteran at quarterback in terms of having a lot of experience with the same offensive play caller, big-time wide receivers, running game has been kind of on the back burner, but they're very explosive. But with that specifically, I look at, a Texas Tech or even a Iowa State with how creative they can get with the running game. I think that is something that is kind of unique, but to Texas's credit, they've already seen good running teams this year, and for a large majority of them, they've stopped them. Going back to the Lincoln Riley offense, that kind of half halo rollout where the offensive line moves left, but that left guard will pull to the right as a lead blocker. Sarkisian does that very often with a DJ Campbell or a Hayden Connor as well. That half halo rollout moves the pocket and creates, and it's in its own right, a guaranteed amount of time in the pocket before pressure gets to you as the result of the defensive line and front seven moving with the offensive line. So that is something we will certainly see with Washington, and they've shown it, time and time again against Oregon both times this year, and specifically in the Pac-12 championship game.
And we got a question for you already, CJ. This one from CW, and he says, CJ, how do you think Texas will defend that pulling in the Washington run game?
Texas has been good at defending the pull game. Anytime they've had guys come, anytime it's been a pertinent issue in opponents' offenses, Texas has been taught to, kind of dive under that pulling guard, kind of blow it up and make him log over the top and jump outside. With a second guy now, which we've seen with Washington several times now, that next guy that fills the alley afterward now has to be aware of what lane he's, going to take, because there's going to be a second guy coming around to close off that edge once again. So that's going to be, at the top of the Texas preparation list. And it also is going to be an important game for the safeties because, with one guy, it takes, just that edge guy, that outside linebacker to kind of blow it up, cause some traffic in the backfield, and then things get logged up. The other guy coming around will certainly allow that running lane to maintain. It's all about the safety and the fill, clogging things up and creating it, a traffic jam really in the backfield.
Hey, the corner's going to have to get off blocks too, CJ.
Yes.
And these are longer receivers for Washington. That's one of the things they do have an advantage on.
No doubt about it, guys. All right. Well, Bobby, if you're ready, I'm going to let you tell everybody real quick about Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm before we move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm is our sponsor for the Wednesday Coffee and Football. We appreciate Adam. If you've been injured in a car wreck and or on the job, make sure you reach out to Adam and his group. They give you a free consultation, 512-280-0800, or visit him at loweylawfirm.com. That's 512-280-0800, or visit him at loweylawfirm.com. All right, I was on the phone. I had to take a phone call while CJ was talking a minute ago. There was a reason for that. It's a source that is near and dear. Look, there has been some contemplation that JT Sanders might return next season. I'm told that, I've been saying that's 75-25 going pro. I think that's more like 90-10 now. He's very likely to go pro. That means that Texas, as a result, will need to step into the portal for a tight end, in my opinion. Not surprising that it's headed in that direction, but sources say that he's the number 2 tight end off the board right now in the NFL draft. Whether that actually comes to fruition, he's 3 or 4, or whatever the number actually is. Reality is that right now he's definitely leaning heavy to going pro. Any kind of thought process that, hey, let's run it back. There's been some trepidation in that regard, because frankly, he's going to be paid so much money that he needs to go take care of himself.
Yep.
That's huge news right there. I mean, it was expected, but still, that's goes to just show a little bit more that it's most likely happening. So, Bobby, we've talked about this, and immediately I knew somebody was going to ask this. Ski Break says, so now do we go after the tight end who committed to Notre Dame? Can you give?
I don't even know who. I don't know which tight end committed to Notre Dame. There's a tight end from Notre Dame that committed to Tennessee named Holden Stays that Texas and Jeff Banks have been in on before, and had told that, hey, if JT Sanders goes pro after the college football playoff, we would love to reconnect, and they're expected to reconnect. Whether or not they'll get in on him or not is a different story. There's also a tight end out of Connecticut, Jordan Jolly, that has looked around a little bit, and Texas might be interested in him. Those are the 2 that I know for sure. There could be more. And remember, there could be guys go into the portal that are just playing right now. They're actually doing nothing more than playing their bowl games, and then could enter the portal. Another portal note that I think is important, Nick Scourton, originally Nick Carraway out of Bryan. He has been playing for Purdue for 2 years now. He announced yesterday he will enter the transfer portal. He had 10 sacks as a defensive end outside linebacker for Purdue last year. I think second team all Big Ten, something like that. Selection, 15 tackles for loss, 6'4", 280. Big guy. He apparently is going into the portal. The other thing I would add to that is I don't know that he's actually in yet, and so Texas has not made official contact. He said he's going in, but I don't think that Purdue has released him to the portal quite yet. We'll see what that means. I will add this. Deion Burks, if you remember, the Purdue wide receiver, he ended up at Oklahoma. And I think Burks and Scourton are friends. And I think that kind of what may have sparked this is Burks found out what the real world was out there in NIL dollars, and may have decided, okay, that's more than what Purdue was even contemplating with me. So look, this is how it's going to work. You're going to have guys enter later after they figure out what their value might actually be. And I think that's what's happened with Stoughton.
Very interesting. All right, guys. Well, we're going to switch gears for a minute and talk a little recruiting, as there's still obviously stuff going on that front. And the news that dropped last night is right here. Anthony Deuce Williams. He says he's committing on New Year's Day. He recently dropped a top 12. Texas, of course, in that top 12, but the Shadow Creek Edge player. CJ, can you give us the rundown on him?
Yeah, talented ball player from a really good program out at Shadow Creek. I mean, Texas fans should be quite familiar with the Shadow Creek program that have, developed and produced a number of defensive talented prospects that have gone big Division I, not even, when you're talking about the Power Fives, they're littering the country right now in that regard. But Williams specifically, one of those off-ball linebackers, more at the Sam. I look at him in a similar role to what we see Maurice Blackwell in right now for the Longhorns. Kind of that field guy that can drop into coverage, come off the edge. Good length, 6'2", 190. Visited Texas in July, where he really was able to get a good idea of what Texas practices were like. Visited again for the Texas Tech game. So right at the end of the season, right after Thanksgiving, the family thought it was, pertinent to get down to Texas and really see, just what a game in Austin was like under the lights. So 2 recent trips, comparatively speaking. He grew up a Texas fan. He told reporters following his junior day visit in July. So a lot of interest in Texas. It's kind of telling right now that a decision is coming right before Texas plays in the Sugar Bowl. And when you consider the ongoing momentum in the 2025 class, it makes a lot of sense that Texas is in that conversation to be the selection.
And Bobby, I'm going to ask you, and then we'll let CJ chime in as well. But who are some of the other 25 guys that you're keeping an eye on, especially defensively?
Well, I would say this. I took a deep dive this morning. I get up early, guys. I took a deep dive at linebacker based off this Anthony Williams news. And really, I think it's a fantastic year at linebacker in state. I think it's not just good. I think the top two, in my opinion, Williams may be in that 3 range. We'll have to see. But Elijah Barnes at Dallas Skyline, 6'3", 210, 6'2.5", 210, plays running back and linebacker. He is one of the most natural linebackers I've seen, middle linebackers I've seen in a long time. Then you have Riley Pettijohn at McKinney, another guy that I think just flies around and makes a lot of plays. If you ask me, those 2 guys right now are as good as any that came out last year. And so that gives you a sense of where I think those guys are. Well, the thing about Deuce Williams that I really liked, and I want to add to this, all 3 of these guys are long-limbed. So we talk about long-levered defenders, and that Texas is trying to not just get bigger up front, faster. They also want longer guys so they can play in more space, et cetera, bring more tacklers down or ball carriers down more easily. Anthony Williams and Deuce Williams, however it goes by, he definitely fits that category, got really, really long arms. I would add one other player to the linebacker list, and that's Nasir Wyatt. He is out of Santa Ana Mater Dei. He was the defensive player of the year at Mater Dei as a sophomore.
Yeah. Okay.
He is a speed rush machine. I mean, absolute machine. That being said, he doesn't play a lot of actual linebacker. He lines up mostly as a rush edge, and he is just absolutely dominating. You see he's a top 50 player in the country. But Pettijohn, Barnes, Anthony Williams, I don't know if Texas is going to have to go out of state if they have some luck here. I know that Pettijohn, Texas, is in really good shape there. He's the teammate of Xavier Filsaime, former teammate, I guess now, of Filsaime. But those guys are elite prospects at linebacker on top of Anthony Williams.
And CJ, your thoughts on the prospects that Bobby mentioned and any others that you may have?
Yeah, no, I was going to mention the length and the size. You know, that's something I even wrote down dating back to the 2024 and 2023 cycles. You look at Anthony Hill, 6'3", kind of in that 225, 230 range coming out of high school. Tassili Akana, I know he's more of an edge now, outside linebacker mold as well. 6'4", 6'3" in that range. Jelani McDonald, that flex hybrid safety tight linebacker, 6'2.5". Leonga Lafau really is the shortest guy at 6'1", but that really goes to show, you know, kind of how, you know, big Texas likes their linebackers. I think it's one of those recurring themes that we'll continue to see. Like Bobby said, you eat up a lot of space. You are able to get off blocks a whole lot easier, and you're able to cover just a little bit more because of the arm length and the ability to move. With Pettijohn specifically, his dad was a defensive lineman at Syracuse. I think that build that he has right now, which is right around 6'2.5", 6'2", 205, 210, I think is what he's listed at. He's in that range to be able to add 20 pounds and maintain his athleticism because he has that you know, high Division I pedigree from his father to carry that weight and maintain athleticism. So that's encouraging to me. And Elijah Barnes, like you mentioned, Bobby, when you watch him on film, he ran an 11-1 in the spring. I think that's really encouraging at 6'2.5", at 215 already. It's something that when you see that size and that speed combined with the instincts, it's encouraging. And I don't want to compare him to Anthony Hill, but when I watched Anthony Hill, his junior spring, run a 4.64 laser at 230 pounds. We already knew he was special, but when you see that in person, you're sitting there thinking, oh boy, like what is the ceiling on these guys?
Hey, I want to add, we talked earlier, just to add to this, we talked earlier about young guys making waves right now behind the scenes. One of them needs to be mentioned is Darian Gillette. A couple of different players have mentioned him publicly as a guy that's coming on behind the scenes. He, of course, played at Marlin as a junior, was an amazing, 3-sport athlete, football, basketball, and then track. I think he finished in the state championships as a long jumper, as a linebacker, just to give you a sense, right, of how good. His dad and he transferred down to Teague, Texas, as a senior, but Darian had a knee injury, and that knee injury actually kept him out his senior year. So he's been getting back, but a couple of different players have mentioned him publicly. He's practicing at the will linebacker spot, is my understanding. Is that question?
Yeah, Bobby, I actually stopped by a spring practice at Marlin when they were preparing for the 4x2. And so obviously that big relay had Darian Gillette running the anchor at 6'3". I think at the time he was around 220. So you want to talk about a big man moving, that was it.
6'3", 220, and runs the anchor. Yeah.
It was impressive.
That's not me, CJ. God didn't give me that gift.
Yeah, surely not me. Not
All right, guys, we're going to go back to the 2025 linebacker conversation for just a moment because we've had a few questions about Jonah Williams and y'all's thoughts on him.
Yeah, he belongs in that conversation. I just didn't watch him this morning. I'd watched him previously. He is a thumper, one of the heaviest hitters. When I saw him of the group, perhaps the best. Maybe the best athlete out of that group. What do you think, CJ? Because I agree. He belongs in this conversation and is clearly a top 10, 15, 20 prospect in the country. His brother is a big baseball player. I think Jonah is a possible baseball prospect as well. CJ, what do you have on Jonah?
Yeah, no, he is. He is. He loves baseball. I remember talking to him in the 7-on-7 circuit, just talking about how much he loves the idea of playing both. He obviously realizes the ceiling might be a little bit higher in football. But Williams, interesting cat because he, at the Under Armour All-American Combine last winter, it was really his first time getting true looks as a safety. And so he's coming in, he's showing off. At the time, his recruitment really hadn't popped off a whole lot. Then he walks into the Alamo Dome down in San Antonio, and he puts on one of the best performances of anybody at the camp, walks away with a 5-star, rating by his name. And the cat's out of the bag in terms of what Jonah Williams brings to the table. But the interesting point there is Texas was really the first school to float the idea of playing him at linebacker, moving him into the box and getting an idea of what he can bring to the table closer to the football, kind of in that DeMarvion Overshown role that we've seen converted safety in high school come down and play inside the box. I'm not sure he was real receptive to it at the time. Obviously, as his recruitment has moved on, it's kind of one of those, snowball effects that, if other schools are thinking about moving you into the box, that's now where we want to put you as well. So kind of a new development for him, at least in the last couple of months, that is now where he's been looked at a whole lot more. And he should be in that conversation because, like you said, Bobby, one of the best athletes in the entire cycle, not just in the class for the state of Texas.
All right, guys. Well, you're watching Coffee and Football presented by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm, and plenty of time to get your questions in, so please do so. And we got a couple of super chats that we need to knock out. This first one here from Blake. Thank you, Blake. He says, I force my girlfriend to watch this show every day. Can you give Kelly a shout out? Well, Kelly, we appreciate you tuning in.
Shout out, Kelly.
Blake, you as well.
Kelly, hook 'em.
And then this next one from Gage Sheets. And Gage says, how does Sark handle preparing for possible Washington surprises in the game plan versus focusing on stopping what they're good at? Do you think Washington will speed up on offense knowing that Texas has trouble with pace?
Man, so here, first of all, you're really talking about Kwiatkowski here, right? Because all of this prep is what surprises there might be in stopping Washington, et cetera. I think Washington might speed up a little bit, but they're not going to overdo it. I mean, they got here for a reason. They're not going to go away from what got them there because they think all of a sudden Texas is that much better than them. Remember, they beat Texas a year ago at this time. And so I think they have plenty of confidence that they can do it again. They didn't have to run hurry up last year to do it, right? And so keep that in mind. I as far as what Texas might do, I tried to think of some things that I wonder if they're not going to use more dime packages in this game with Maurice Blackwell on the field. Maybe generate a little bit more pass rush by pushing down Anthony Hill. There are things Texas can do that we've talked about. CJ mentioned that Jahdae Barron is cross-trained a little bit at safety this winter after the Oklahoma State game. So that's a possibility to kind of move pieces around. I don't know exactly what Texas has in store, and if I knew, I wouldn't give it away on Coffee and Football for the record. I mean, I think that Texas needs to come out. CJ had a stat last night on our live stream. One of the things that I think is important is starting quickly in this game. Washington ranks 7th in the country in points scored in the first quarter. They're not going fast or anything. They're just going normal speed, and they rank 7th in the country in first quarter points scored. Well, guess what they do in the second quarter? They rank 1st in the country in points scored in the second quarter. So one of the things that CJ talked about last night that I completely agree with in retrospect is that Texas needs to start fast, not play fast. They just need to blunt Washington's likely fast start, if that makes sense, and then get going on their own. Hopefully Texas scores on its first possession, and then you get going that way. But Washington comes out on fire historically. That's been Kellen DeBoer's way. He schemes them up as well as anybody. So that's one of the things we're gonna have to watch for.
Yeah, real quick, Bobby, to your point, they don't go fast, but they line up quickly. And that's one of their things that they showed against Oregon pretty often. They get to the line of scrimmage and they get set with about 20 seconds left on the clock. And then they look to the sideline, get an adjustment, get an audible, line up again, and get the play off. They're 84th in the country in time per snap at 27 seconds. So it's not a fast offense, but they line up quickly and they make you stay on the field as a result. The other thing, the little wrinkles that we'll have to monitor, obviously, as the game comes closer, and this is not something that we can project or predict at all, Bobby, but it's the pre-snap motion. Washington is 5th in the country. 65% of their snaps have some sort of pre-snap motion. Obviously, that's a lot of motion. There's a lot of film on what they can do, but in a game like this, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see another wrinkle or chapter added to that motion book to kind of throw Texas off into a look that they haven't seen this year.
All right, guys, this next question, we're going to stay on Washington here for a little bit. Michael Hernandez asks, what's your thoughts on having a spy? Their quarterback definitely can break open the game with his legs during crunch time. We need to have him in a box. I just don't see them spying him. What about y'all?
No, I'm with you. It's no Jalen Milroe. It's no Dylan Gabriel. Penix is a good athlete. He can run. He's not looking to run. And I think this is one of those things. I don't think teams will ever put a spy on Quinn Ewers, but I think Penix is one of those guys who falls into that Ewers category of, he's a capable runner. He's not a willing runner, and he's not going to be designed to run. So, no, I don't think a spy is necessary at all.
No designed runs. You got to be kidding me. They're not going to put – if they've got 2 games to win the national championship, Texas isn't going to design run Quinn Ewers either.
Right.
That not when it relies so much on their arms. The future does. I would add this. The thing about Penix, he is a functional runner. I think that's a fair assessment, but he's not Dylan Gabriel. He's not somebody that they're going to do a QB draw with, for example. I would be shocked if they would, because all it would take is one hit and their hopes for a national championship go out the window.
All right, guys, this next question from Space City Wrangler. It's a 3-parter, so bear with me here. He says, after doing my own breakdown of the game, I think the key is limiting Washington's first half possessions. Texas has to stay on schedule and deliberately embrace 7 to 9 play drives, eat clock, and shorten the first half. Now, how do you do that?
Execute.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. I mean, and I don't know if y'all have seen this, but it happens in a lot of bowl games. The offenses come out disjointed a little bit at the start because they're not in rhythm like they were during into the season where everybody, everybody was on time and syncopated, I guess is the right word. The issue is you see that often where a couple of drives early look out of place and then they pick up. I think that Texas may have a couple of stops early. It's going to be, I really believe this is going to be a 4-quarter game, and whoever scores last wins. I think these two offenses are very special. I really do. I think Washington has a 6th-year quarterback that is very experienced in the offense itself. It's his 4th year in the offense. Then you add in the fact that he's got these receivers, one of which is a first-rounder. Texas has a quarterback that has been coming on of late and then has multiple draft picks at wide receiver and tight end. I just think we're even with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, Ethan Burke and Anthony Hill and Jalen Ford. Even with those guys, I, for whatever reason, am seeing, a game in the 30s right now. And whoever scores last wins.
I guess this next one is a comment. Oh, excuse me, wrong one. The Chain says, Husky fan here. Your coverage of both sides has been great. And Bobby, I got to say, we get a lot of fans, during game week. No doubt Washington has been one of the most respectful ones in the chat so far this month. So thank y'all for tuning in. We definitely appreciate it and appreciate
You mean the Red Raider fans weren't polite and the Sooner fans weren't polite? Come on now. The Sooner fans coming in here talking, they're not going to be polite.
All right, guys. Well, I believe that Cedric Griffin is ready to roll with us. He is here, so I'm going to go ahead and add him. Former Texas defensive back and national champion Cedric Griffin. And Cedric, how you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well, man. Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate y'all.
Appreciate you coming on. Hey, Cedric, we got to ask, you played in a national championship game. What's the week like leading up to it? Nervous energy, a lot of thoughts. What's going through a person's head right now?
I think it's every other game, honestly. I mean, that's what the coach is going to tell them. That's what the players are going to believe. And that's the routine. Football players, professional athletes, their regiment, they're always in routine. So they're going to stay in their same little game plan. They're not going to make this game, any bigger than it is. Because it's just the next one. And they're gonna believe that, and they're gonna go in there and have fun. So I think this week is all about just staying calm and understanding that the pressure is on, but we gotta go out there and execute the game.
You guys get a lot of distractions on bowl week. I mean, there's truly, whether it's interviews or going to Disneyland or going to eat a bunch of steak somewhere to going to somebody's ranch to, for a special dinner. I mean, people don't realize the social demands on a team going to a big game, whether it's the Rose Bowl or the Sugar Bowl. Explain how that plays into the whole situation, because you don't get a lot of downtime.
Right. It's not a lot of downtime, but man, for me, I took it in stride, and I think a lot of our players did too, because student athletes, we have a busy schedule anyway, from school to studying, to study hall, to practice, to film. So we're used to, to that workload. We're used to just always being spread out. But yes, that is true. We go to these dinners, we have interviews, we have all the obligations that, that advertisers, I'm now that I know, want us to be there. So it's a busy schedule. But I think the guys are already locked in. For the athlete, it's more of just kind of presenting yourself and just being there and kind of just being on. But at the end of the day, it's the game's about football, and they're locked in, man, for sure. So, but the travel, all that good stuff is there. I don't think it's too big of a distraction, honestly, and I really don't, because it is just part of the game, man, and they know that by now.
Yeah, Cedric, thanks for joining us this morning. We were talking to Rod Babers last night, and he was talking about, when he was on campus and that next class came in, and I think that was you included, that kind of competition in the DB room, was outrageous, and it really elevated his play. The competition on the field was obviously through the roof. We're looking at a Texas defensive class this past, cycle which is bringing in 5 guys. Obviously, there's a lot of talent on campus now. When you arrived, I mean, how did you kind of look around and think, all right, now it's time. I've got to, put on my big boy pants and get to playing. What was that like for you?
I think, and you're right, man. The similarities are definitely growing. What Sark is doing right now, I'll be completely honest with you on that one. He's bringing in talent on top of talent on top of talent, and he's making them compete. And it was a quote up in our hallways at the football locker room that says, "Competition breeds excellence," and that's kind of what they're doing right now. I mean, they're stacking talent, and they're gonna make you play, or this is gonna be the next man up at the end of the day. So I think that's awesome. When I came in, I looked forward, to all that competition because I knew that was gonna make me better. I've always played on good teams. I've always had people that were better than me. But if you have the mindset to outwork somebody, and you have the talent, it's a good combination. So I think that's what Sark is doing up there, and the rest of those coaches is just bringing in talent and then making the talent compete against one another, and that's gonna make you better with no coaching, with whatever. Just being around talent just does something to the brain, does something to the environment. And it just helps. It helps the team for sure.
Cedric, you guys won a lot of football games in your time at Texas, a lot. But you also lost some games too. And I remember a time when Mark Clayton turned you around seven different ways to Sunday against OU one year when you were, I think, you were a freshman, right? And he was an upperclassman. How do you take a something like that, and then you become how many years you play in the league? 7 or 8 years?
Yep, we got about 7 years in.
Yeah. How do you take an early loss like that? Because I know that hurt. How do you take that and turn it into, hey, I got to get better. I'm good enough. I just got to work on my craft. Because that showed, I thought, not a lot of people remember that, but that showed, look, I'm young and I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm also here to compete and carry this on. And I thought you just did a tremendous job of that over your career.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna happen, in football or in life or just in any aspect of just living. You're gonna go through some bumps, man. You're gonna go through some lumps. But I think just having some a good supporting cast around me, some good coaches, some good teammates, people who believed in me, and just what I come from of just going through adversity, and everyone goes through adversity, and it's always certain degrees of it, right? But everyone does, and those times make you who you're gonna be, in your adolescence and your adulthood and things of that sort. So I was able to bounce back, man, because I love football and I wanted football and I wanted to be good, and I didn't want to let myself down or the people I come from down, and that made me just go at it. And that's kind of how I deal with everything, anything, man. I don't want to be down. I'm not gonna be down. So I'm gonna find a way, and that was my mentality, man. I'm just gonna find a way.
Well, it wasn't just you that had that mentality. A lot of players on that national championship team had it, and this is my segue to it. A lot of the players on this team playing in the college football playoffs 2 years ago, they were 5-7. Now, then 8-5. Now they're 12-1. You got Jalen Ford, Jahdae Barron, Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat. I mean, Tavondre Sweat was the one laughing in the bus at Iowa State. You know what I mean? When Bo Davis went postal or whatever you want to call it, right? Jared Thompson was on that team. A lot of guys, right? It seems like they've kind of taken on that mentality of, hey, slow and steady and keep improving. You've seen them mature over the last couple of years. What stands out to you about this 2023 football team for the Longhorns?
I think you said it again, right? It's just overcoming the things that people are talking about, like the media. You can pretend like you don't hear, but everyone hears the noise that that's being talked about you, or the praise that's being given to you. So I think they just got tired of it because they know they're talented, but maybe they wasn't just putting their all into it. Maybe they were just arriving on campus and thinking, hey, we made it, we arrived already. This is great, this is cool. But that's not what it is, man. Like Texas is tradition. The coaches who come here, they want to win. Everyone wants to win. The fan base wants to win. So they heard the rhetoric that was going around, and they just wanted to make some improvements. And I think that's what they've been doing so far is making improvements. And I don't think they're all the way there yet, honestly. And I really don't. I think they still have just a little bit to go, but for them to make the college football playoffs this year, last year leaving the Big 12, that's leaving a mark. That's gonna bode well. Winning the Big 12 is gonna bode well for them. Going into the SEC, and they're just gonna keep making strides. But it's been fun to watch. It's been fun to watch for sure.
We got a question just now about how Texas is going to prepare for Washington and their kind of trickery, if you will. The high flying offense, and with Roma Dunze, Jalen Polk, obviously Michael Penix was in the Heisman race. When y'all were playing USC, it was Lindale White, Reggie Bush. Obviously, you knew what Matt Leinart could do as well. But when it came to a game plan, did y'all kind of know ahead of time what they could do, or was it just let's stop them at what we know they could approach us with and adjust to what they will do on the fly? Was there any kind of approach to if they come out of the bag looking completely different, we know how we're going to adjust, or we're going to be prepared for everything, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no question, man. I mean, that's what coaches and GAs do, right? They're scouting those teams and they're watching that film, and then our coaches are then putting their defenses behind every single last play that opposing teams got beat on, or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, they're going through every scenario for sure. But then, they're prepping us. They're preparing us to play those defenses. And as long as we play our coverages, as long as we do our assignments, as long as we don't have any mental breakdowns, the coach say we're going to win this game. And that's kind of how that always goes. It's like it's always going to be 2 or 3 plays in the game that, you got beat on. And coach is going to go back, hey, you missed that assignment. And that was a blown assignment. So we're prepared for everything. The players are prepped. And everything, yeah, man. I think everything is crossed and dotted, man. Because the implication on this game is you go to the national championship, and anytime you go there, there's revenue going on. I mean, there's more sponsorship. I mean, everything goes down. So they're prepared. They're overly prepared. But more importantly, I think they prepared the players, and they put them at ease, and they let them know that they can win this game. Basically, and they can. They have the roster for it. I mean, their depth is amazing right now.
Right.
Hey, Cedric, let people know what you're doing now. Life after football. You're in the barbecue business. Is that correct? What do you have going on each and every day now?
Man, I be trying to do everything, honestly, man. Just because I have some free time, and I just try to put my hand in everything. But I coach track. I mean, honestly, that's kind of what I really do for like my youth summer track club. And then I coach at Faith Academy, and it's in Marble Falls. And I coach the middle schools, and I help out with the high school as well. And yes, during the morning times, I cook some barbecue. So barbecue goes down in at lunchtime in the evenings, but it's all cooked overnight and during the morning. So that's what I do. I like to stay up, and I'm a big time thinker, man. I write a lot, man. So like barbecues are up my alley. I just get to sit and watch the fire, and that's not hard. So I ain't got to worry about getting ran over or getting twisted and turned every which way. I just got to make sure that brisket is good and juicy and tender, and my chicken is fall off the bone and all that good stuff. So, but yeah, that's what I'm doing now, man. I cook some barbecue for a little restaurant called the Smokehouse Cantina. It's out here in Lago Vista, and that's kind of where we stay as well. And it's right next to home, man. So it's easy. It's easy living for me right now, just because I get to do what I like to do, man. I coach track, and I'm cooking barbecue, man. So I'm feeding people. I'm in service, and that's what I've always said I wanted to do, man. I always said I wanted to be in service of others, and I'm providing it, man. So it's cool.
That's awesome, Cedric. Well, before we let you go, man, one final question. You got to give us your prediction for the game against Washington.
Man, I haven't. See, I also call myself. I like to try to analyze data. I like to try to see if I can pick games. So I haven't done that just yet. So, but of course, I want Texas to win, but I don't know who's gonna win yet. I'm gonna put my little data out there before the game starts though for sure, and let y'all know what the data say. And then, but I for sure want want the Longhorns to win, no question about it. But we'll see what happens.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Hook 'em, bud. You have a good week.
That was great.
Yeah, hook 'em, man. Y'all be easy.
Yeah, you too, man. Take care.
Thank you,
All
Cedric.
right, brother. Yes, sir.
All right, Cedric Griffin, everybody, former Texas defensive back national champion. Go check out his barbecue. He's the pit master at the Smoke Cantina in Lago Vista, as he just said. So he's living the good life, fellas. It sounds like it, doing what he loves. Can't beat that.
No, not at all. That sounds awesome.
All right, well, you're watching Coffee and Football presented by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. And Bobby, one of the things that I know we wanted to bring up today is you put a poll up on the community page for On Texas Football, and I am going to bring this up. And the question was your favorite memory so far of the 2023 season, and the overwhelming people answered the complete demoralization of Texas Tech. Were you surprised that was the most popular pick?
Well, it's the most recent. There's some recency bias, right? I will say this. So the touchdown against Xavier Worthy started the season off with a bang, right? Then Adonai Mitchell, his catch against Alabama was equally impressive because it put Texas back ahead, right, in the fourth quarter. Then you have the fourth down goal line stop by Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy, Barron Sorrell, and then the catch by Adonai Mitchell against TCU. And then the whole game against Texas Tech kind of encapsulated the season in some respects because you had the Brett Yormark preseason shindig in Lubbock where he kind of just put his foot in his mouth over and over. He couldn't even say Sarkisian so bad at the podium after the Big 12 championship because of it. The one I didn't put in here and a couple people brought up to me was the play Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington made against TCU after the interception, where they literally got up, both of them got up off the turf, One caused the fumble and one recovered the fumble. As a wide receiver, both of them probably ran 80 yards on a single play to make that play. That I probably should have put that play in here somewhere along the line. Because I do think that was indicative of a team that was unwilling to lose, and they were going to pay whatever price they had to pay to win a football game. So, what did y'all think? What did y'all think the play of the year was, Blake, CJ?
I lean always towards the Kansas State goal line. I remember sitting there in that game, having watched Texas hit a wall as hard as they did in that second half, just thinking there is no reason for Texas to be winning or to have even won that football game. When you think about the missed field goal at the end of the fourth quarter, the missed PAT, and then eventually the fourth down stop to this day, I thought that was the worst coaching decision we've seen from an opponent coach that Kleiman made. I couldn't believe they went for it. There was no offensive movement at all for Texas in that late fourth quarter. And I just remember sitting there thinking, they get down to the 4-yard line after the first play of their overtime drive and just thinking the game's done. There's no way they don't get 4 yards out of the next 4 plays. And sure enough, one by one, it was the batted pass at the line of scrimmage. It was a 90-mile-per-hour overthrow at right over the middle of the field. And then obviously the final play where it was Byron Murphy and Barron Sorrell finding a way to get pressure on the quarterback. And, man, what a game. It was one of my favorite endings to a Texas football game I've ever seen.
I'm going to have to go with, man, it's hard, but it's one of the two of either Worthy or Mitchell's catch against Alabama because, number one, it showed that, Mitchell is going to be a really good player. Like that was the point where I was like, okay, they do have something to compliment Worthy. And then number two, at the same time, it was also like, all right, this team may actually have something cooking here. They're doing this against Alabama on the road. And I think that game as a whole is more of a season-defining moment that's, led up to this game against Washington. So I don't think you can go wrong with any of them. And like you said, I do think there's some recency bias with the Texas Tech deal, which, everybody obviously loved, especially going into the season with all the chatter and everything the coaches and what's his face said from the Big 12. But I really feel like the Alabama game is kind of what set the stage for the entire season. So
I think you could pick the good thing about a year where they're 12-1, you can pick a number of them.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't even put the 4th down stop against Houston in there. I didn't put the Xavier Worthy catch and run against Wyoming where he looked like he shot out of a cannon. There are so many good plays. Jonathan Brooks had some just scintillating runs, I thought, this year. Quinn Ewers made some unbelievable passes. The Tavondre Sweat Heisman pose kind of put a bow on the season too. I think that you could talk about all of those kind of things, but just that's what happens when you're 12-1. To the victor go the spoils, and that's what's happened.
Hey, this is an interesting comment. I hope you guys didn't see it in the chat because I'm going to turn it into a trivia question. The Washington has only lost 2 coaches to other jobs. Can y'all name those coaches?
Darrell Royal and Steve Sarkisian.
Man, Bobby. And Bobby steals it here. Sergeant Pickles, fun fact for the chat.
Yeah, that was too easy.
Yeah,
that was too easy. Darrell Royal spent time at Mississippi State before going to Washington. Sark went from Washington to USC. Yeah.
So very interesting fact there for sure.
I knew one of those. Let it be on the record. I knew one.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to get back to taking some questions here. And let's start with this one from Hookem 1029. He says, do we see Quinn take off more when the play breaks down now that he's had a month off to heal up that shoulder? He took more sacks after he came back from injury, didn't use his legs like the beginning of the season.
I still don't think it'll be a big part of the game plan, but it certainly could be. Obviously, a month off, no one on the team should be feeling any type of aching or pain. Ewers did show, the desire to run a little bit more early in the season, and obviously following the hit against Houston, I don't think he was really looking to take off and use his legs a whole lot. Good thing for Quinn is it never really felt like, except for that one play in Houston, he wanted to engage contact. And even that play at Houston, it was kind of like, Quinn, you're 195 pounds. What are we thinking here? But no, I don't think it'll really be it won't be a huge part of the game plan. It'll be like if everything's, broken down, there's nowhere to go with the football, and I have a lane for 10 yards, that's when we'll see Quinn. I don't think it'll be something we see too often.
Here's one thing I would say. I'm just looking at last year's stats in the bowl game. Texas was not very efficient. They were okay on 3rd down. They were 6 of 15 on 3rd down. If Quinn Ewers needs to run for a 1st down, he needs to take those 1st downs and move the ball, because Washington's offense is too potent to just go 3 and out. You've got to take the 1st downs. You've got to create the 1st downs, whether that's running or what have you. I don't expect it to be a focal point of what Quinn Ewers does. But I remember last year against Washington, there was a time Texas was moving the ball and in Washington territory, and it was a 3rd down pass that just went short kind of to Jordan Whittington, and Jordan Whittington didn't make the catch. And that's the play this year that has to happen. It's not so much the run game of Quinn Ewers, it's the short passing game to move the sticks. That has to be on point on Monday, because you just can't give them the ball back. You just can't do that.
Yep.
Sandman 23 asks, will Washington pass the ball to set up their rushing attack?
It's a good thought. We talked at length this morning about the kind of approach Washington will have on the ground. I also think they'll, use that running scheme to open up the passing game, whether it be a rollout right, having 2 pulling guards, in that situation to then pull back and have a bootleg, what may have you. It's one of those things where Texas knows what's going to happen in the passing game regardless. I don't think there's anything that they could come into this game and say, well, we didn't know that they could throw the ball this way, because we've seen it on film. Penix is really darn good. That passing game, I would be surprised if there's an aspect there that surprises the Longhorn secondary. And again, we saw it last year. I thought Texas came into that game and had a pretty good game plan to defend the pass. It was the run game that really kind of ate them alive and really kept them on the field for as long as it did.
The run plays in the second half, CJ. That's what Washington does. They try to open it up, and then they milk the clock by running the ball late. It's what they did against Oregon.
Problem is it bit them a little bit.
Yeah, but I will say this. That's what Sark does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a lot of these offensive coaches do. They try to get up on you, and then they insert the power run game, and all of a sudden you're playing from behind, and the clock's running. I think Washington's the same way.
Before we move on and take a few more questions, Bobby, I'm going to let you tell everybody out there about Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam's a good friend of the program. If you've been injured in a car wreck or on the job and think you might be due compensation, there's only one person to call. That's Adam Lowy at the Lowy Law Firm, loweylawfirm.com, 512-280-0800. Adam and his firm give you a free consultation before you ever sign up for anything. Give them a call if you think you might be due compensation, 512-280-0800, or visit him at loweylawfirm.com. Thanks, Adam, for your sponsorship in 2023 of On Texas Football.
All right, guys, we got time for a few more questions here, and we're going to get to as many as we can. But let's take this one from Eric76. He says, Bobby, does the 25 game bar go for other positions the same way it does for quarterback in regards to the NFL draft? Seems that would hurt recruiting and guys leaving. Your thoughts?
I don't think so. I don't think that an offensive tackle needs it. That was a stat specifically made up for quarterbacks. And it is statistically significant. I don't know if anything's been done at offensive line that's similar, but 25 or more starts for a quarterback, their long-term, their longevity in the NFL goes up precipitously. That's the key.
And then, CJ, this next question for you, kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier in the show. Richard Walker says, didn't Baylor try running outside with multiple pullers? Pretty sure we went with wider and bigger ends when they did that.
Yeah, Texas did. And if you remember early in that game, Baylor used a 2 tight end look to begin that game, and it was sack city for the Texas front seven. That's something Washington's going to have to at least be wary of. If they do that, they can't, attack these Texas defensive ends with 2 tight ends, because that will be something that Texas takes advantage of on the front seven. And also to that point, I think he's correct, because it was Ethan Burke and it was Jet Bush who started that game off, both with sacks that pushed Baylor into about a 3rd and 28 early in that game. The point about Washington pulling their guards as often as they do, when they get to the goal line, they don't do it at all. It's something that they will use power running right at you to get into the end zone. They don't want to run the risk of someone shooting a gap and getting into the backfield to really create a negative play. And I think that kind of differs from what we saw specifically against Texas against Oklahoma on that 4th and 1, or that 4th down stop on the 1 yard line, where Texas was continually finding a guy to come across the offensive line and create a hole that really wasn't there. It's all power downhill for the Washington offense when they get into 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, or even on the goal line.
And then
I want to
circle
back on a stat I said earlier. Remember how I said that they ran the majority of their plays last year against Texas, majority of their run plays in the second half? They ran the ball 28 times, Washington did last year, for 150 yards or so. Of those 28 times they ran, 19 came in the second half. So literally 2/3 basically of all play, all of them came in the second half.
Yeah,
that's what they try to do. They try to get out early and then kind of impose their style of ball, which is a little bit of a keep away. They had a 14-play drive and a 13-play drive against Texas last year. They're willing to nickel and dime you. And that's what that shows.
Bobby, you alluded to this earlier, but Jesse Ullman says, should we play dime, put more coverage and speed on the field, and our defensive line should still be able to limit the run game?
You know, CJ just mentioned something really interesting to me. I hadn't thought about them playing big on the edge, maybe taking Burke off and putting Collins in. You could do that theoretically and still play dime behind it. Mm-hmm. That might be a unique look to consider. I just hadn't thought about it, to be honest. Maybe that's something that PK has in store for Washington. I like the idea, although I will say this: I think Ethan Burke has done a good job of wedging against of collapsing the onside blocker, the trap. So I feel like there's an element there that I'm worried about with Alfred Collins because he hasn't done it as much this year. He hasn't played that role as much and kind of defeating that kick out block. But I could see playing dime behind it. That might be the element of surprise.
And this has been a topic that's been talked about in the chat for a little bit. Jesse D just asked, have y'all chatted about the fact that Sark has coached 3 of the 4 teams in the playoffs? I haven't even thought about that.
No,
it's true.
That's pretty cool.
Everybody but Michigan. The question, the rumor on the street, guys, is that Brian Kelly's the next head coach at Michigan. That's the rumor. After Jim Harbaugh goes to the LA Chargers. So we'll see. I mean, it may be smarter for him to actually go and be in the pros where he can act like a pro coach as opposed to, sending scouts to games across the country, et cetera.
I
really wonder if Brian Kelly goes to Michigan, what does that do? Seriously, what does that do to recruiting at LSU?
Yeah.
And how many kids want to get out of their letter of intent immediately? Because they could actually go into the. I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah, how many go right back to A&M?
Yeah, or somewhere else. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how all that works out and with Harbaugh and everything. Bobby, you got a question here from Brian. He says, can you discuss the impact of a 5th or 6th year quarterback? He's 3 years older than Quinn and has tons of experience.
I guess the best way, it's like a senior point guard going up against a freshman point guard. And, that's basically the reality. And I feel, though, that Quinn has come on particularly strongly in the last 4 to 5 games. Ever since that TCU game, I thought he played really well against Iowa State after he stopped getting self-sacked. That third and fourth quarter, I thought was really good. Played really well against against Texas Tech. Played really well against Oklahoma State. I think he's just hitting his groove a little bit. That being said, Michael Penix knows where everybody on the field is supposed to be at every single point in time in the game. Like that's how well he knows this offense. That's got to give his team and his teammates an incredible amount of confidence. But look, I think their offensive line has to beat the Texas defensive line or at least draw a stalemate. And I think the Texas offensive line has to impose their will a little bit so Texas can actually run the ball to give Quinn Ewers a little bit more comfort and cushion.
And then Russ Swaim asked, have you all found it interesting? There have been so many penalties called in bowl games, especially last night with Kansas. How important will it be for Texas to play a clean game to win this year?
Well, they can't keep shooting themselves in the foot with the pre-snap penalties. That's been an issue the entire season, whether it be snapping fractions, false starts. They don't line up, incorrectly in terms of illegal formations all too often, but it has occurred this year. Pre-snap penalties in a game like this are killer. So, yeah. And to your point, Blake, that game last night, oh, my goodness.
200 yards of – hey, look, 200 yards. 200 yards Kansas gave UNLV in penalties. 218 yards. I've never even heard of that much before. Jason Bean, by the way, I was going to give you all this. I did some counting on bowl games so far. So the Pac-12, Washington, they're home. They're currently 1-2 in bowl games. The Big 12 is currently 2-0 in bowl games. The ACC is currently 2-1 in bowl games, and the Big 10 is currently 2-0 in bowl games. The games tonight or today: Virginia Tech, Tulane, UNC, West Virginia in the Mayo Bowl. Louisville goes out to USC and plays USC in the Holiday Bowl in San Diego. And the final game tonight is A&M versus Oklahoma State at the Texas Bowl. I want to add this. That game opened with A&M favored by 2. Oklahoma State's now favored by 2.
A&M has 55 total players for that game. That's the count that's been reported right now. 55 total players.
Half of them are with the other 30 or have either opted for the pros or in the transfer portal, I guess.
It's crazy.
No. Hey, Bobby, real quick, and I know this is going to be a sore subject, but the Kansas game last night reminded me of Texas-Miami Cotton Bowl with the penalty yards. I knew I was going to get a reaction from you.
I was on the sideline for that Texas-Miami game, guys. That was the fastest team I'd ever seen in person.
Unreal talent.
That Miami team, I mean, when Kevin Williams ran by on a kick return, I literally heard him go by. It like made a little wisp sound as he ran by. I was like, that our guys didn't sound like that.
Yeah, that game's the one that set the record, I believe, for most penalties and penalty yards in a bowl game, with most of them being unsportsmanlike conduct penalties on Miami. Oh, man.
That was people may not remember this. That was, if you were there, that was a brutally cold day. That was a brutally cold day.
Yeah, I think most Texas fans want to forget that one. All right, guys. Jay Kessler here says, is there a chance that this game looks a lot like the 22 game in Lubbock, where Washington maybe goes for it on fourth multiple times to avoid giving Texas the ball or letting Worthy return a punt?
It's one of those things that we've talked about here. Texas has to take care of the rock and not give Washington short fields because you know about their offensive power. Washington's in that same boat. Short fields for Texas has been, it's been cash money. So it's one of those give and takes where I think both head coaches are going to respect the other's offense and play calling ability to the point where you can't give them short fields. You can't give them anything that they didn't earn themselves. And no one goes for it as much as Texas Tech. That's a Joey McGuire staple. That's what makes him as well. I want to say the double-edged swords with Joey McGuire is either you love how aggressive he is or you hate it because it doesn't work. But that's just what you get with his kind of coaching approach. I don't think DeBoer is anything as similar to that. I don't think really anybody is.
Yeah, I would add this. So I did something yesterday. Red zone efficiency, guys. 70%, and this includes fourth down conversions as part of it. Washington is 70% of times inside the red zone, they score touchdowns. 70%. Texas is at 49%. Now, the Washington defense gives up red zone TDs 75% of the time. Or 70.5% of the time. Texas gives up 45% of the time. I think that is going to be part of it. Texas has to come out better on fourth down inside the red zone when Washington goes for it.
Okay, we're going to take a few more questions here. And this, Bobby, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Russ asked, do we know who and what conference the refs will be for the Sugar Bowl this year? Is it not the Big Ten refs? Is that correct?
I do not know that for sure. I haven't seen that list.
I believe it's going to be Big Ten this year for the Sugar Bowl. I'm sure somebody in the chat will be able to know that one. All right, Brian Jones says, who is the most unlikely player for Texas to have a standout game against Washington?
Jaron Thompson.
That's a good question. I kind of want to throw a feeler out on a Gunnar Helm. You know, Texas goes into 12 personnel. All attention is going to be on Jatavian Sanders. We've seen a little bit of him this year in the pass game, not a lot. He's, you know, as far as I know, reliable, sure-handed. You can get yards after the catch if he's open. So I wonder if there's a play, you know, kind of in the bag drawn up for him, you know, on a leak out, bootleg, whatever it may be. So I like him. If you're thinking unlikely, he's probably on that list for the unlikeliest.
Going back to that question about fourth downs and will Washington go for it a bunch? Washington's only gone for it on fourth down 15 times all year. They're 11 of 15. Texas, by comparison, has gone for it 30 times this year. So I don't know that Kellen DeBoer has had to be very risky all season long.
I wonder how many of those fourth downs Texas has gone for has been on the first drive of a game, too.
That Sark loves to do that, man. He wants to establish an identity early.
No, I like it. I like it.
And it is the Big Ten refs will be the officiating crew. There we go. All right. Let's see here. Rob wants to know, not to look ahead, but what amount of preparation in the past month might have gone for the final game?
Well, not much on the field.
Correct.
So not much on the field. Behind the scenes, Texas has a support staff that's broken down not only Michigan, but Alabama as well. And I do know that they started breaking down Michigan first because they had already broken down Alabama before. So they're just going to renew or revisit what they did before with Alabama. But so they had to do Washington first, obviously, then Michigan, then Alabama.
Okay, guys. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of Coffee and Football presented by Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm. But before we get out of here, Bobby, I'm going to let you tell folks what they can expect later today right here on Texas Football.
Yeah, absolutely. Rod Babers and I are doing a little segment on the state of the program, talking a little bit about what we expect to see from the Longhorns on Monday, as well as some things going on behind the scenes. CJ and Rod getting together for Talking Ball later, and then CJ, Rod, and Ray Peters have the live stream later tonight. Tomorrow, guys, there are a bunch of press conferences set for the Sugar Bowl, including players and some coaches. We'll make sure we get some of that up here for you as well.
For sure. All right. So be sure to tune in to all of that. We want to thank you all for tuning in this morning. Got to thank Cedric Griffin for joining us as well. Want to thank Adam Lowy and the Lowy Law Firm for sponsoring today's show. And we'll be back same place, same time tomorrow. Bobby, one quick question from me before we get out of here, though, because I've seen it asked in the chat. New Year's Day, obviously the day of the game, coffee and football, stuff all day long on Texas football, right?
Yes, coffee and football starts at 8 a.m. on New Year's Day. Then myself, CJ, we're going to be over at Manning's in New Orleans. That's the sports bar. It's owned by Archie Manning. It's part of the Caesars Entertainment Group. We're going to be there, I think, from 10 o'clock on in the morning. We're going to be doing a lot of content. Hopefully, we'll have a lot of great guests as part of that. A lot of former Texas players and ambassadors will show up to that. If you don't have a ticket for that, there are still general admission tickets available for it. Go to TexasSugarBowl.party. That's TexasSugarBowl.party. We'll be there all day. It's going to be a fun time. Let's go party in New Orleans, man, on New Year's Day. Watch some football. They've got over 100 TVs there. So, I mean, this is going to be like a smorgasbord of big-time football.
You can't beat that for sure. All right, well, for CJ Vogel and Bobby Burton, I'm Blake Monroe, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Welcome.